Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brief discussion about calling winners in political races. It's part of the Society of Professional Journalists Truth Day. We originally were going to call it BS Day, but we thought better of that. I'm Fred Brown. I'm an adjunct instructor in media ethics at the University of Denver, and formerly a longtime political reporter, editor, and columnist for the Denver Post. Joining me is Julie Pace, Washington Bureau Chief for the Associated Press since June of 2017. And before that, she was AP's senior White House correspondent. As Chief of Bureau, she's responsible for AP's coverage of the presidency, politics, and the US government. She began her career in 2003 as a television reporter in South Africa and joined AP in 2007 after a stint in Tampa. She won the White House Correspondents Association's Merriman Smith Award in 2013 for her coverage of the Obama presidency. And we're both graduates of the Medill School of Journalism. These are challenging times for reporting on politics and the presidency. There has been an unprecedented surge in early voting. Doubts are being raised about whether the integrity of the election process or whether results are reliable in the election process. Old ways of covering elections, including exit polling and race calling, have changed. Julie, how has the AP responded to these challenges?
Thanks, Fred. It's a good question. Thanks for having me today. So, we've both changed and we haven't changed. At the AP, we've been calling races since 1846, which means we have called races through a lot of difficult times in this country and a lot of contentious moments. This certainly is one of them, but we have done it before. So in a lot of ways, we're starting from a baseline that is very familiar to us. I would say one of the big changes, that we have had to account for in this election is just this real surge in mail-in voting. And the reason that that is particularly complicated this year is that you have an increase in the number of people using mail-in voting that is exceeding where a lot of the laws and rules in some of these states are when it comes to counting and tabulating those votes. So for example, you could have a state like Pennsylvania, which is seeing a real increase in use of mail-in voting, but still has a rule on the books that won't allow them to actually start counting, tabulating those votes until on election day. That could slow down this process in a really incredible way. And so we're in this sort of never-ending process right now of getting up to speed on state rules. State rules are changing even at this late point in the election. And so we're constantly having to tweak our models, tweak our planning around that. We have Supreme Court decisions, that are affecting rules in certain places. So, we like to kind of think that what's happening right now is a change in state elections that would be happening over the course of a couple of years that's really having to happen over the course of a couple of months. And that has certainly added some chaos to the process.
Yeah, and exit polling, for instance, is one of those things that changes a lot. And I guess AP has adopted something called AP Votecast. Is that going to take the place of exit polling entirely?
For the AP, it does. The AP decided after the 2016 election that we wanted to do something new. We felt like we had some questions about the traditional exit polls, their reliability, and we thought that there was a better way to do this. And so we launched AP Votecast. We debuted it in the 2018 midterms, had great success with it. This is the first presidential election that we'll be using it in. But essentially what Votecast does is it takes into account the way that Americans are voting now. We designed this before the pandemic, but it's even more relevant now because we talk to people well before election day about, how they're counting, how they're casting their ballots, who they're casting their ballots for, what issues are on their minds. What I really love about Votecast too is that it also gives us a sample of non-voters. We spend a lot of time in elections talking about who is voting, but sometimes who doesn't vote is also really crucial to determining the outcome. So when we get through election day, we will have this really large, the largest sample of voters and non-voters that we've ever had. And it will give us an ability to look at the electorate going into our race calls. It is a tool that we will use to determine if we can call races. But coming out of the election, when we do know the results, it will give us a lot of rich data to dig into in terms of looking at different slices of the American electorate.
Have you already started polling on that?
We are in process. We are in process.
Does it continue right up to election night?
It does. It absolutely does.
In generally, are the standards, would you say, stricter for calling a race than they used to be?
I don't know if the standards are stricter. I mean, we at AP, our guiding principle on calling races is that we want to be right. It doesn't matter if we're first or last, we want to be right. We never want to have to take a race call back. I do think, that everyone is particularly conscious in this election cycle about just how important that is. There are a bunch of different forces at play in this election that require us to be perfect on our race calls. And if that means taking an extra couple of minutes, checking our math and our numbers, I think that is much more important. And that ultimately, I hope, will build confidence in our race calls with the public more than trying to rush out a race call. We're not really competing with anybody on the race calls. There are other news organizations that call races, but we all do that independently. And so there's not really a competitive spirit on the race calls the way there is around news coverage of the elections. And I think that all of us, who are in that business are taking a little extra caution this time for sure.
Yeah, I with all the doubts that have been raised by the president, among others, do you anticipate that there might be any attempts for candidates to prematurely claim victory, or that there will be election night claims of voter suppression? And how would you address those?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I mean, we've been gaming out a lot of different scenarios in this election. And I think, certainly one of the scenarios that we are talking about is what happens if a candidate declares victory and we have not called the race yet. I think there are two different things you want to think about in that situation. One, sometimes a candidate declares victory because it's very clear where something is headed and our race call just isn't there yet. Maybe we are being a little more cautious. We just want to take a little bit more time, but there's nothing wrong with them doing that. It's very obvious where the race is going. But I think the scenario, that people are talking about is the scenario where actually the results are completely unclear. We don't know what's happening. Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or one of these states is very much up in the air, and a candidate says, I have won the race. And I think, the way we are going to approach that is, we can't ignore when that happens. It will be out there. It's not something you can't put the genie back in the bottle in that moment. But I think it's really crucial that in any place, a news alert, a headline, a photo caption, a video caption, anywhere that we might transmit what that candidate is saying, that those words are bracketed with the facts, with reality, which will be not just that AP hasn't called the race, but why we haven't called the race. I think we need to be really transparent about that last part. It's not going to be enough for us to say, candidate X says this, the AP has not called the race. We have to get into details. We have to be able to prove, kind of show our work to our audience so that they do have confidence in what we're saying. We have to be able to back up that position. We're totally prepared to do it. And I think that that's, really what you would see from us in that scenario, a lot of transparency and a lot of information to explain why what that candidate is saying is not the truth.
Transparency is a very important principle, and I think it's embraced more now than it used to be in the journalism profession, where you really have to get as much information out there as possible. I know when I used to I didn't call races for the Denver Post, but I was a political editor. I was in charge of political coverage. We had, like AP, we had every county in the state had a correspondent calling in results. And for the bigger races, we always waited to see what AP had to say, because you guys are the gold standard. Finally, what happens if the national popular vote interstate compact ever takes hold and the electoral college doesn't mean as much as it used to? Because then the popular vote would be what determines what direction each state's electors
Right.
go.
It's certainly one of the scenarios. There are a lot of scenarios around election that people, are talking about, what happens if. And I think that, the scenario you're talking about, becomes particularly relevant to a lot of people if we end up in a similar situation to what happened in 2016, where one candidate, in this case, it would almost certainly have to be Joe Biden, just because of demographics in this country, won the popular vote, and Donald Trump, though, won the electoral college and won the presidency. And there are a lot of people that look at that and say, hey, I don't understand. That's not fair. That's not the way that this should go. Well, it is the way it goes right now in America. I think that, conversations about changing the electoral system have happened for a long time. They certainly happened after the 2000 election. And we always kind of end up back in the same place, where we go back to the electoral college model. Those of us at AP, we adjust to where the rules are. We absolutely do. It's whatever the rules are, we will adjust our race calls to. We don't dictate.
You froze there, Julie.
Oh, did I? No, you froze.
Apparently something happened, but I think Julie made her point, and it's I'd just like to say again, thanks very much to Julie Pace, the AP Washington Bureau Chief, for her contributions to SPJ Truth Day. And thank you for listening to us, and have a good rest of your day.